They say, sorry, too often, not because they have done something truly wrong every time, but because the word has become a rhythm, a habit, a quiet refuge from imagined disapproval. People who apologize too much live in a world of anticipation. Every action is weighed, measured, and tested against invisible rules. Every word is filtered to avoid offense, even when none exists. This compulsion is not mere politeness. It is a map of inner fears, a history of emotional negotiation, a reflection of self-worth constantly under assessment. Behind each sorry lies a nervous system on alert, a past that demanded overcorrection, and a mind seeking safety through submission. To watch them apologize is to witness a subtle dance between care, anxiety, and the longing to belong. It is at once tender and quietly exhausting. Apologies are meant to repair, to acknowledge, to mend. But for some, they become more than that. They become a rhythm, a habit, a quiet tether to the anxiety that lives beneath each interaction. People who apologize too much often move through the world as if walking on fragile glass. Every word, every gesture is measured for its potential to offend, disappoint, or be misunderstood, even when no harm has been done. The compulsion to preemptively say sorry emerges. It is a signal, an almost unconscious reflex to smooth the emotional landscape around them. From the outside, this behavior seems courteous, even gentle. They seem aware, considerate, careful not to hurt anyone. But inside, their nervous system is alert, scanning for threats, cues of disapproval, and imagined mistakes. The apology becomes a protective charm, a talisman against judgment. Repeated apologies often reveal more about internal tension than social etiquette. They mask a fear that love, acceptance, or respect might be conditional. They suggest that the individual believes they are inherently problematic unless constantly correcting or placating. Every sorry is a subtle admission I am not safe to be as I am. The emotional weight of this habit is heavy. It creates a cycle where the person apologizes to avoid conflict, then apologizes for apologizing, then apologizes again for fear they are too much. It is exhausting because the energy spent on verbal correction is rarely acknowledged as self-protective. Instead, it can feel like failure. I am too anxious, too sensitive, too burdensome. Often, these apologies occur in moments that others barely notice. A pause before answering a question, a hesitation in conversation, a mild inconvenience, holding a door too long, spilling coffee, misplacing an object. Each moment triggers internal alarms, and the word sorry is deployed reflexively, a signal of vigilance rather than guilt. This pattern is not the result of mere politeness. It is a map of emotional history, a reflection of early experiences where mistakes were punished, reprimanded, or magnified, where children learned that their presence had to be managed carefully to avoid conflict or rejection. The apology became a survival strategy, a social lubricant, a preemptive shield against disapproval. In adulthood, the pattern persists, often unconsciously. They apologize in meetings, in friendships, in intimate relationships, not because they have caused harm, but because their nervous system anticipates it. Even as they recognize the habit, the urge is difficult to resist. It is a familiar pathway in thought and speech, built over years of conditioning and reinforced by the relief it brings. Ironically, the over-apologizer often experiences shame for apologizing. They notice the pattern, the frequency, the way it may frustrate others. Yet the compulsion continues, creating a loop of guilt layered atop anxiety. The apology, meant to prevent rejection, becomes its own source of stress. The weight of words, then, is double. It carries both the responsibility for imagined mistakes and the exhaustion of perpetual self-surveillance. It is a quiet burden that few see, because externally, the person appears gracious, accommodating, and gentle. Inside, however, there is tension, vigilance, and a constant calculation of how much is too much, how little is safe. This quiet recognition, the first step in awareness, is essential. To see over-apologizing not as a flaw or weakness, but as a symptom of vigilance, fear, and internalized expectation. To recognize that beneath each sorry is a mind and body seeking safety, belonging, and approval. And only by acknowledging this weight can the journey toward balance, self-trust, and freedom from habitual apology begin. The habit of apologizing too much rarely begins in adulthood. It is born in childhood, nurtured by subtle cues, unspoken rules, and emotional landscapes where safety and approval were conditional. Some children grow up in households where mistakes were punished, criticized, or magnified. A spilled cup, a wrong answer, a loud tone. Any small deviation could trigger anger, disappointment, or withdrawal. In such environments, the child learns quickly it is safer to anticipate blame than to risk it. Apologies become a tool, a way to smooth tension before it escalates. Other early experiences teach the lesson more subtly. Affection is given when the child conforms, complies, or minimizes themselves. Recognition comes not from being, but from performing correctly. Over time, they learn that self-expression is risky and that harmony is maintained through concession and self-correction. The apology emerges as a strategy to secure connection, even when no overt harm exists. Cultural and familial norms also shape this tendency. Politeness, humility, and deference are often praised, especially in children who are naturally sensitive or socially attuned. You should be kind, don't make waves, think of others first. Phrases meant to instill empathy can become internalized as obligations that extend beyond reason. Apologies then become a reflexive way to navigate these expectations, signaling compliance and emotional attentiveness. Attachment patterns play a central role. Children with anxious or ambivalent attachment learn that love and approval fluctuate, dependent on behavior and perceived compliance. They develop hyper-vigilance toward social cues, attuning to every frown, sigh, or pause. Apologies become anticipatory, preemptive signals designed to prevent rejection. Even when the threat is imagined, the nervous system responds as if it were real. For some, over-apologizing is reinforced in adolescence and early adulthood. Peer interactions, school environments, or early romantic relationships can reward self-effacement and overcorrection. The adolescent learns, if I apologize, I am liked, accepted, or safe. This reinforces the pathway, embedding habitual apology as a core strategy for social survival. Interestingly, over-apologizing can also emerge in response to trauma or relational unpredictability. Adults who endured neglect, emotional inconsistency, or early relational betrayal often overcompensate with deference, striving to mitigate potential conflict. The apology becomes a shield, a way to assert, I am aware, I am careful, I am safe. By adulthood, these origins, childhood conditioning, attachment patterns, cultural expectations, and relational survival strategies have crystallized into habit. Apologies are no longer occasional gestures, they are a default setting, a subconscious mechanism that guides interaction. The adult may not even recognize the pattern until someone points it out, or until they notice the fatigue and tension it carries. Over-apologizing is, therefore, deeply human. It is not weakness or moral failing. It is a learned response to environments that demanded vigilance, emotional attunement, and self-regulation from a young age. It is survival instinct in verbal form, a way to maintain connection and safety in the face of perceived threat. Understanding origins does more than explain the behavior. It reframes self-perception. The habit is not evidence of flaw, but of adaptation. It is a sign of emotional intelligence misapplied, sensitive, aware, and caring, yet trained to overcorrect rather than inhabit confidence. And in this reframing, the first seeds of change emerge. To unlearn over-apologizing, one must first understand why it began. Only by tracing its roots can the adult begin to loosen the reflex, recognize self-worth independent of constant deference, and navigate interactions without habitual guilt or fear. Over-apologizing is more than a habit, it is a behavioral pattern rooted in psychology, nervous system response, and learned cognition. The brain, conditioned over years, interprets social interaction through the lens of potential threat. Even minor gestures or words can trigger hyper-vigilance, prompting the habitual apology as a preemptive measure. Social anxiety plays a central role. People prone to over-apologizing often exhibit heightened sensitivity to evaluation. They monitor facial expressions, vocal tones, and body language, searching for disapproval. The sorry becomes a tool to mitigate perceived threat, even when no negative judgment exists. It is not about guilt, it is about survival in social contexts. Attachment theory provides further insight. Adults who over-apologize frequently display anxious or ambivalent attachment patterns. In early life, love and acceptance may have felt conditional, dependent on compliance or performance. This creates a hyper-attuned nervous system, primed to anticipate rejection. Apologizing becomes a learned strategy to maintain closeness and secure validation. Cognitive patterns reinforce the habit, perfectionism, self-criticism, and rumination fuel over-apologizing. Every action is mentally assessed. Was that appropriate? Did I offend? Should I correct it? This internal loop triggers the apology reflex, a short circuit designed to resolve tension immediately. Even minor infractions, spilling a drink, interrupting a conversation, activate this cognitive mechanism. Neuroscience explains the physiological underpinning. Repeated hyper-vigilance engages the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. Chronic activation leads to heightened stress responses, increased heart rate, shallow breathing, and muscle tension. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for moderation and reasoning, becomes fatigued under constant load. Apologizing functions as a coping mechanism, a way to signal safety to the self and others. Learned guilt also contributes. Over-apologizers internalize responsibility for others' emotions, even when unwarranted. They carry a heightened sense of accountability, feeling compelled to manage social dynamics continuously. The habitual apology serves to preempt criticism, repair imagined harm, and maintain relational equilibrium. Over time, the nervous system encodes this pattern as default. The behavior becomes automatic, unconscious, and difficult to interrupt even when the individual recognizes it cognitively. The physiological response persists. Apologizing becomes a reflex, not a choice. Interestingly, over-apologizing is often coupled with prosocial tendencies. High empathy, conscientiousness, and desire for harmony can intensify the compulsion. Sensitivity that once served adaptive social navigation now creates internal strain. The word sorry is deployed not only to protect oneself, but to shield others' emotions, frequently at the cost of personal energy. This insight reframes the behavior as a complex interplay of biology, psychology, and social conditioning. It is not simply a personality quirk or excessive politeness. It is a pattern born from early experiences, reinforced by cognitive loops and embedded in physiological response systems. Understanding this mechanism is critical for change. When over-apologizing is seen as an automatic response rather than a moral failing, the adult can begin to create space for intervention. They can practice self-awareness, track triggers, and experiment with alternative responses. They can learn to differentiate genuine responsibility from habitual deference. The psychology behind over-apologizing is both intricate and compassionate. It reveals a mind and body striving to navigate social worlds safely, a nervous system calibrated to care, anticipate, and protect, and an emotional history that taught survival through words, sometimes at the expense of self-preservation. And in acknowledging this, the adult can approach their habit not with shame, but with curiosity, understanding, and the first steps toward freedom. Over-apologizing is not only external, it is internal. It thrives in a mind that constantly evaluates itself, measures its worth, and anticipates judgment. The adult who apologizes excessively carries a dialogue that is both persistent and unrelenting. Did I do enough? Did I offend? Am I too much? This internal conflict creates a unique form of tension. Every interaction carries double weight: the words spoken and the internal monitoring of those words. Even small missteps, mispronouncing a name, interrupting a conversation, arriving late can trigger a cascade of self-reproach. The habitual apology is a response, a release valve for anxiety, but it rarely resolves the tension fully. Self-criticism compounds the pattern. Over-apologizers are often perfectionistic, believing that if they were flawless, apologies would be unnecessary. They magnify minor faults and minimize achievements. A simple oversight becomes proof of inadequacy. The apology becomes a ritual, a verbal acknowledgement of perceived imperfection. Guilt is persistent. It is guilt for speaking, acting, or existing in ways that might inconvenience others. Even harmless presence can feel like transgression. The internalized message is subtle but powerful: I must make amends to be accepted. Apologies are deployed preemptively, before any actual offense, because the fear of social rejection outweighs the reality of the situation. Conflict arises between authenticity and safety. The over-apologizer wants to speak freely, to act without constant self-monitoring. But the compulsion to apologize restrains expression. Every moment of assertiveness is weighed: will this upset someone? Will I need to apologize afterward? This tension creates emotional fatigue, making social engagement draining rather than fulfilling. Relationships are affected in complex ways. Frequent apologies can signal humility and care, but they can also undermine credibility and assertiveness. Partners, colleagues, and friends may perceive over-apologizing as weakness or lack of confidence. The internal conflict intensifies: I apologized, but now they may think I am incompetent. Should I apologize for apologizing? It becomes a self-reinforcing loop. The adult may resist change, even when aware of the pattern. Apologies have become a tool for safety, acceptance, and connection. Letting go feels risky, as if to assert oneself without apology might provoke conflict or rejection. The nervous system, conditioned over decades, remains alert. Fear, guilt, and habit fight awareness. Yet recognition of this conflict is also an opportunity. Awareness creates a space between impulse and action, a chance to explore alternative responses. The adult begins to differentiate genuine responsibility from habitual overcompensation. They learn that acknowledging errors is important, but over-apologizing is optional. Internal conflict, then, is both burden and teacher. It reveals the depth of care, sensitivity, and social attunement the adult possesses. It also illuminates the cost of survival strategies developed long ago, in childhood or adolescence, that no longer serve them fully. To navigate this stage is to cultivate patience, observation, and self-compassion. It is to witness the tension without judgment and to experiment with restraint. It is to allow discomfort in moments of perceived transgression without immediately resorting to verbal amends. The over-apologizer begins to understand that internal conflict is not a weakness. It is evidence of emotional intelligence applied unconsciously. The challenge is to harness that intelligence with intention, rather than letting it perpetuate exhaustion, guilt, and self-criticism. For those who apologize too much, the turning point is rarely sudden. It often arrives as a quiet, disorienting realization: I say sorry more than I need to. Sometimes it is triggered by another person's observation, a gentle remark, or even a reflection in solitude. Other times, it emerges through the recognition of exhaustion, tension, or the subtle erosion of self-worth. the moment of awareness is both relief and discomfort. Relief, because the pattern is finally visible, named, acknowledged. Discomfort, because this habit has been deeply entwined with identity. To recognize over-apologizing is to confront years of self-protection strategies, social conditioning, and nervous system vigilance. It is to see that every sorry has been both shield and burden. Physiologically, awareness can be felt as a shift. The body notices the frequency of apologies, the tension in speech, the tightness in the chest or throat. The nervous system begins to register the cost of hypervigilance. Fatigue accumulated over decades becomes more tangible when the habitual behaviors that sustain it are illuminated. Emotionally, awareness brings ambivalence. There is guilt for past over-apologizing, shame for perceived oversensitivity, and fear about how to act differently. Yet there is also curiosity, a sense that change may be possible, that words can regain freedom, that self-worth does not require constant verbal repair. Awareness often highlights relational consequences. Apologizing excessively may have inadvertently diminished credibility, created subtle tension, or reinforced power imbalances. The adult recognizes how over-apologizing shaped interactions, sometimes facilitating connection, sometimes limiting autonomy. This insight is not blame, it is clarity, a lens to examine the personal cost of a deeply ingrained habit. This turning point also reveals opportunities for agency. The over-apologizer begins to see that authenticity can coexist with empathy. They can assert themselves, express opinions, and navigate social dynamics without automatic self-correction. Apologies can be reserved for genuine mistakes rather than habitual preemption. Often, the moment of awareness is accompanied by internal questioning. Who am I when I do not apologize? What does it feel like to speak without preemptive correction? These questions are uncomfortable because they challenge the familiar pattern, yet they are essential for growth. They mark the threshold between unconscious habit and deliberate choice. Some adults experience small victories immediately, pausing before saying, "sorry," reframing an internal judgment without vocalizing it. Noticing that relationships continue even when a habitual apology is withheld. These moments cultivate confidence, self-trust, and the understanding that presence and empathy do not require constant verbal repair. The turning point is rarely a singular event, it is a process of accumulation. Each recognition, reflection, and experiment with restraint deepens insight and recalibrates behavior. Awareness itself becomes a form of liberation, signaling the first steps towards sustainable change. Ultimately, the moment of awareness reframes the over-apologizer's relationship with themselves. The habit is no longer unconscious. It is no longer inevitable. It can be understood, observed, and modified. And in this realization lies possibility, the chance to reclaim speech, presence, and self-worth from a pattern that has long demanded more than it gave. To replace compulsion with intention, tension with ease, and habitual apology with authentic expression. After recognition comes the work of integration. For the over-apologizer, this means relearning boundaries, internal, emotional, and relational. It is a slow, deliberate process, not a single act of will. Boundaries, once foreign or even frightening, become tools for self-preservation rather than walls of isolation. Learning to set limits begins with self-awareness. The adult observes triggers moments of tension, anticipated disapproval, or perceived inconvenience. They notice the automatic impulse to apologize and pause. Within this pause exists choice to respond authentically, to reserve the apology for genuine transgressions, or to release the need for verbal repair altogether. Boundaries extend beyond speech. They govern energy, attention, and emotional investment. Over-apologizers often carry invisible debts, feeling responsible for moods, outcomes, and perceptions that are not theirs to manage. Relearning boundaries requires disentangling responsibility. I can be empathetic without assuming blame. I can care without sacrificing my voice. The process is reinforced through practice, saying no without guilt, expressing an opinion without preemptive softening, allowing oneself to occupy space without apology. Each act, no matter how small, strengthens the internal sense of autonomy. It trains the nervous system to tolerate discomfort without defaulting to verbal submission. Self-compassion plays a central role. Boundaries may provoke anxiety, especially when the adult fears judgment or relational tension. Gently acknowledging this discomfort without self-reproach reinforces new patterns. The over-apologizer learns that discomfort does not equal failure, and assertiveness does not equal harm. Relationships transform during this integration. Some connections adapt gracefully, appreciating honesty and authenticity. Others may resist, revealing dynamics built on the adult's habitual deference. Even so, the adult gains clarity. Relationships that thrive on mutual respect, rather than constant appeasement, are sustainable. Those dependent on over-apologizing are not. Integration also involves reframing guilt. Guilt no longer functions as a signal of moral deficiency, but as a cue to examine the necessity of an apology. Not every minor slip demands verbal correction. Not every perceived offense requires accommodation. This discernment reduces the mental load, freeing energy for meaningful engagement rather than constant self-monitoring. Emotional resilience grows alongside boundaries. The nervous system, once hyper-vigilant, learns recalibration. Moments of tension are met with awareness rather than compulsion. Empathy remains, but it is no longer tethered to self-erasure. The over-apologizer discovers that presence, connection, and influence do not require continuous self-submission. Relearning boundaries is not linear. Old habits reemerge in moments of stress, fatigue, or perceived threat. Yet with awareness and repetition, the adult gains tools to respond differently. They practice restraint, assertiveness, and selective apology, reinforcing new patterns with patience and self-compassion. Ultimately, this stage restores equilibrium. The adult begins to inhabit their life fully, authentically, confidently, and with intention. Apologies are reserved for real transgressions, rather than automatic responses. Boundaries protect energy and self-worth, creating space for genuine empathy and meaningful relationships. In relearning boundaries, the over-apologizer discovers freedom from guilt, from compulsion, and from the invisible weight of constant self-correction. Freedom to speak, act, and exist without fear. And in that freedom, the first seeds of authentic presence, ease, and joy take root. A life lived without habitual apology is quieter, not in sound but in tension. Words no longer tremble beneath the weight of imagined judgment. The over-apologizer, once constrained by reflex and fear, now discovers a new rhythm, one guided by intention, not compulsion. Speaking without fear begins in small moments. A simple thank you is offered without softening it with sorry. A differing opinion is expressed without prefacing with apology. Even silence, once filled with anticipatory guilt, is held without anxiety. Each choice reinforces a central truth: presence does not require self-erasure. Relationships evolve alongside this freedom. Connections deepen when honesty replaces automatic appeasement. Mutual respect emerges where once overcorrection maintained fragile equilibrium. The adult learns to engage fully, to listen without overcompensating, and to communicate authentically even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Internally, fear diminishes. The nervous system, once hyper-vigilant, experiences space. Every interaction is no longer a threat to belonging. The adult learns that social harmony does not depend on constant self-correction. Words regain their natural weight, they convey meaning, not preemptive guilt. Self-worth strengthens. It is no longer tethered to how many times one apologizes or accommodates. Value is inherent. The adult recognizes that being human means imperfection, occasional missteps, and boundaries respected. Apologies are used consciously, not habitually. Each one holds significance, reserved for genuine moments of accountability. Freedom to speak without fear also invites curiosity and exploration. The adult experiments with tone, expression, and assertiveness. They test social waters without anticipating rejection, learning that others can handle honesty and imperfection. Empathy persists, but it is liberated from overcorrection. Energy once exhausted on reflexive apologies now flows toward presence, connection, and creativity. This stage is a culmination of awareness, integration, and practice. It is not perfection. Old patterns may resurface, and moments of anxiety are natural. But the adult now possesses the tools to navigate these moments with self-compassion and conscious choice. The nervous system is no longer hostage to habit. The mind is no longer enslaved to fear. The poetic truth of speaking without fear is subtle yet profound. It is the reclaiming of voice, the recognition of worth, and the liberation from the invisible chains of habitual apology. It is the understanding that care, empathy, and connection can coexist with confidence, boundaries, and authenticity. The journey of the over-apologizer is not one of shame or moral failing. It is a story of adaptation, survival, and resilience. Words once deployed as shields now become instruments of clarity and genuine engagement. The adult learns that authenticity is not reckless, that presence is not dangerous, and that humanity is inherently worthy of acceptance. Ultimately, speaking without fear is an invitation to inhabit life fully, to engage without compulsion, and to express without apology for existence itself. It is the gentle reclaiming of space, voice, and self. A life once constrained by habit now flows with intention, empathy, and quiet strength. In this freedom, the over-apologizer discovers something they may have never imagined. The world does not collapse when they speak without preemptive remorse. They can be both sensitive and strong, empathetic and authentic, kind and unapologetically themselves. And in that delicate balance, they finally live fully, freely, and without fear.